Hi folks, Dr. Lou here to talk about 7 ways to learn game design. First of all, keep in mind that it's not game production, it's game design that I'm talking about. Game design isn't about programming or art or sound or many other things that are required to make the software for a video game. Game design is about specifying how the game works and how it plays, which really needs to be enjoyable for the players in your target market. Video games are software, but nothing in game design requires software. And I've talked about this in other screencasts. Here are the preliminary considerations. You won't be good at it when you start out. That's true for most anything complicated that you do. Think about it. Even big games that you play, you're not very good to start with. You get much better at it as you go along, through practice, through doing it. If you think game design is simple, you've got a big problem to overcome. Moreover, what makes you a good game player isn't what makes you a good game designer. So forget about your gaming prowess. It doesn't matter. And finally, game design is not about getting ideas, it's about execution. Everybody has ideas. What's important is what you do, what kind of game you make. So, a list of 7 ways to learn game design. But this is not an exclusive list. You can do several of these at once. You could do all of them at once, although that would be a little bit rash perhaps. But don't think of it as you're doing it just one way. So I'm going to go through the 7. You can start with tabletop design. There are lots of reasons. I'm going to mention a few. I have talked about this at greater length in my Learning Game Design course. You don't need programming skills to make tabletop games, whereas you do need those skills to make video games. And because the ultimate goal of game designers is to make complete games, you've got to make a complete game. If you're working with video games, then you've got additional things you have to learn to do. Another reason, because it's not software, is you can make a change and then immediately play the game and see what difference it made. Another reason is you can't hide behind the computer. People who design video games sometimes say, oh, well, the computer will take care of that, when they have a problem with their game design. And they find out ultimately that the computer can't take care of that, but by then it may be too late to change it. Or you can start with Game Maker Studio. This was a program originally created to help people learn game programming on PCs, but it's so good that some commercial games have been made using the engine. Not AAA games, but commercial games that have done fairly well. There's a free version as well as a pro version. And all you need to remember is Yo-Yo Games, Y-O-Y-O, and you can find it online. Or just look up Game Maker. It has a drag and drop interface, so no coding is required, but it has coding built in if you want to learn coding. And there are excellent tutorial books available, so you can use those to help you learn. And of course there's a really big community at Yo-Yo Games. Or you can start with Unity and Playmaker. This is a favorite combination of university instructors. Unity is a professional, but for learners inexpensive, really free, development system. It's more and more becoming the common development system for indie developers. Some of the big developers still use the Unreal Engine, but an awful lot of people now use Unity. And when you make a game with Unity, it's relatively easy, although it costs a little money for other versions, to convert it to many different platforms. So the difference here between Game Maker and Unity is Unity's perhaps going to be harder to do, but you can make much bigger games with Unity and 3D games, which you can't do generally with Game Maker. Another thing you can do is called modding, making small modifications to existing games. Of course, modding is the more complicated part, Or you can just use a level editor that's included with the game and make levels for the game. It's a way to learn. It won't make entire games, but it gets you part of the way. If you're using tabletop games, make variants of well-known games like Risk, Diplomacy, Chess, Settlers of Catan. That's a good way to learn. You have to read a lot. If you're a person who's decided that you're not going to read, you're in trouble. There are a lot of things that are on video, just like this, but there's still a great many things that are only in text. Books, magazines, blogs. And you've got to listen, videos, podcasts. You need to read about how the world works, about good history, good economics, good literature. Game designers need to be well-rounded people generally. You need to challenge yourself in your reading. Take online classes. But keep in mind, a lot of classes that have game design in the title are actually about game development, especially programming. In fact, aside from my own online classes, there are one or two massively online open classes that don't cost anything and very little else. So of course I recommend my own classes. Now, there are universities that have online classes, but those cost the earth. And you still risk being in a situation where the person who made the class really doesn't know much about game design. And the most extensive thing and the most risky thing you can do is take a degree in games or game design. Be very careful here. There are lots of private, for-profit schools that take advantage of student dreams and make money off of students. Many colleges are not regionally accredited colleges, which is how normal colleges are accredited. So the degree you get from one of these not regionally accredited colleges doesn't count as a real degree. Oddly enough, national accreditation doesn't count. There are 5 regional accreditation bodies, and that's what counts. Many of the game degrees you take at these institutions, even if they're called game design, and often they are because it's a sexy term, teach almost no game design, or the instructors have almost no clue. This is often because the degree originated as a way to provide students for programming instructors who otherwise were running out of students because people weren't going into programming. Even the state-supported schools can be very expensive. The exception is community colleges. If you can find a community college where you are or willing to move that offers a really good game degree course, that's where you want to be, at least for the first 2 years before you go on to university. In the end, you have to complete games. There's no substitute for completing games. Nobody cares about half-completed, or I say half-baked games. At least no one who counts in game development. You have to show you can do it if you want to be hired. Intention doesn't count for much. It's action that counts. If you're going to be a freelancer, you have to submit a complete game to a publisher, not something partly finished. If you're going to self-publish, you have to have a completely finished game, not something that's partly finished. You must complete games. And the biggest mistake that so many beginners make is they work on a game for a while and then they get distracted and they work on another game and they never complete any of them. Bad idea. Now, as I've said, I discuss this topic at much greater length in some of my online classes, and you can get more information. You can get discount URLs at pulsivergames.com.